Hello. So, just finished recording the level 1 solution video for Killer Cages here. Immediately roll into level 2 here. Apparently, I'm very lucky that I happened to load this page about 20 minutes ago, because it seems like Logic Masters is actually down at the current moment. So, it's a good thing I had this open. So, I'm going to open level 2 here. I'm going to be running on the assumption that if you are here, you have either watched the solution video for level 1, or you've already solved level 1, in which case that you don't actually really need that detailed of a description of the rules here, that you should already kind of know what these rules mean. That being said, I have not solved this in a couple weeks myself, so going to be doing this not blind. Obviously, I've made it recently, but might get stuck once or twice to remember what to do next. So bear with me. If it gets bad enough, I will just cancel and re-record. Yes, same rule set here. Is standard normal Sudoku rules, dynamic fog again, as well as killer cages with the same logic as before. Again, I recommend keeping killer calculator on. I'm going to have it on here. I don't believe it's quite as necessary as it was with the 3 cell cages and 4 cell cages in the last one, but it's still useful to have on. So, the way we begin this one is a little less obvious, but again, I'm trying to teach lessons when I'm setting these. So, we have a bunch of cage options here that each have 4 options, if you were to look at them. So, with 10, we have 1, 9, 2, 8, 3, 7, 4, 6. We have 4 of them in the box down here. So one way of thinking of why that's important is any digit that doesn't appear in these 4 options, in this case 5, cannot go in any of the 10 cages, so a 5 would have to go here. So that's one way to think of how you can get some initial digits. Do very similar up here and up here. The other way to think about it that I want to highlight here is kind of a more important lesson to get with Killer Cage Sudoku, is if you've ever watched Cracked the Cryptic, you will have heard of the secret before, and that is if you were to think about any box, or row, or column in the grid, they're always going to contain 1 to 9 ones each. That sounds like an obvious statement to make, but I'm highlighting it here because in the context of a puzzle using summing with cages, it might be useful to think about what would a whole row, column, or box sum to, meaning 1 plus 2 plus 3, etc., up to 9. And that number is 45. And so a lot of the time you might have situations like this where there's multiple cages in a row or column, and it's sometimes useful to think about what the total of those cages are, and how far away is that from 45, and what difference is there, because that difference can give you information about the sum of the remaining parts. In this case, we don't have to think about the summing, per se, of the remaining parts, because the remaining part is just 1 cell here. We have 4 cages summing to 40, so the thing left over must be 5, in order to make the whole box come to 45. Those are 2 different approaches you could take here. And we could do the same thing over here. If you were to do this through the summing approach, we have 4 copies of 9, which brings us to 36, which means a 9 goes in the middle. Alternatively, 45 minus 9 4 times just leaves you with 9 left over again. And same as the bottom left, we get a 5 up here. And that is our beginning break-in step. We get a bunch of other cages revealed, as well as all the existing cages, which don't really have a whole lot of progress on them yet. So I am going to, again, do probably more pencil marking than the average person would do, but I'm going to use it to visualize kind of where progress is happening. Because if we ever figure out what one of these cages are, it will have impacts on the rest. So this might be making the grid look a little busy, but again, we're just visualizing what's happening. These cages are nowhere near resolved yet. There is nothing telling us anything about them yet, so they are obviously not the place to look yet. So might be good again to look for cages with small sums or big sums that only have one option. So up here we have 16, which can only be summed to as 7, 9, and a 4, which can only be summed as 1, 3. 1, 3 in this row takes out a 1 from here, which takes out a 9 underneath it, and a 3 here, and a 7 here. It also takes out from the row, this 10 cage can no longer be 1, 9, or 3, 7. We'll have a similar thing down here. 7 and 9 takes out 3, 7, and 1, 9 down here, as well as 7, 9, 1, and 3 over here. So that still doesn't give us digits, but it did remove some options. Maybe now we can look at some other things, like a 15 cage here, that's either 6, 9, or 7, 8. 9 comes out from here, which takes out 6 from there. The 6 cage is either going to be 1, 5, or 2, 4, and it cannot be 1, 5 due to this. So that must be 2, 4. So again, make sure we're taking advantage of our pencil marks. A 2 in the row means this can't be a 2-8 cage, and a 4 means this also can't be a 4-6 cage. So this one's very close to getting resolved. Now the 14 cage down here, which is either 5-9 or 6-8, and similar to this one, it can't, or similar to this not being able to be 5, this also must not be 5-9. So we have 6-8, shakes out 6-4 for both of these, as well as 8-2. And 13 cage, which has 3 options, and iterate through them. It can't be 4-9, or no, it can't be 4-9. It cannot be 5-8, and it can't be 6-7 because of the 6 down here. That leaves us with 4 and 9, and we know the order of that there. Which also now, 9 here, means this now must be 7 and 3 in this order. 3 and 7 comes out from those cages. What else are we looking at here? Feel like I missed something. I mean, we could take out 4 here and 5 from there. Oh, this column. We want to ask what can go here. We need a 1 or a 2. And this cannot be a 2, because we have a 2-4 over here. So that must be 1, that must be 2. That 1 resolves this cage over here, giving 3 and 7. This now can't be 7, 8 in either way. That's 9 and 6. Make sure we're updating these. So 2 and 7 come out from there. 6 and 3 comes out there. 2, 7 here, 6, 3 there. Very easy to miss these. This is one of the downsides of doing this approach with over benchmarking, is it's very easy to miss stuff. But if you have the conflict checker on, it'll always be highlighted red. If I was not using the conflict checker, there's no way I'd be doing this kind of benchmarking. I'm only doing it because it's convenient with the red. The only thing left here is to think about what can go here, and that must be an 8 for the row. And that gives us more digits now. Or more clues, rather. Clean up these. Oh. Now, we got an 18 cage over here. We got a 19 up here. And a 19 up here. So it might be good, since we have information about digits around them, it might be good to think about what things could or could not go in here. Vertical information is not going to help in this case, because in order to say rule out a 3 here, we would need to have a 3 in all of these columns. So we'd have to have 1 here, somewhere up here, and like another 3 in one of these 2 spots next to the cage. Horizontal information will be more useful here. So we have a 4 and a 9 on the row. So we can take out options involving either of those, and we're already reduced down to 1 option, which is 5, 6, 8. We can do the same thing in this column with 9, 6 up here. And we have basically the same thing. We have only 1 option left, 4, 7, 8. You could probably see the symmetry at this point if you haven't already spotted it. The only thing non-symmetrical as far as clues go so far is this 18 cage over here. If you were to sort of tilt your head and look at the grid sort of in this negative diagonal, you'd see that all the clues are reflected across that diagonal. Unfortunately, usually that sort of design often results in grids that end up being fairly symmetrical. That also explains why we have this sort of bow angle arc shape here across the symmetrical border. But I basically had to put a clue somewhere in the grid that broke that symmetry in order to really have some success at having the grid be a unique solution. So we have 5, 6, 8 here, 4, 7, 8 there. Might be good to look at this now. See what we can remove from taking out 2, 4, 9 here. 2, 4, and 9. We unfortunately still have 2 options, but that is more reasonable at pencil mark, so I will type those in. We have 3, 7, 8, or 5, 6, 7. Unfortunately, at least as far as immediate conflicts, no breaking with that. But we do have information here from the 5, 6, 8. This cannot contain 5, 6, 8. So we actually know this just has to be 3, 7 now, because we've already reduced this to only options that could go in the cage to begin with, and now it must be 3, 7. And only one of those options involves both 3 and 7, which means that must be an 8 along with it. 8 coming out from here means 2 comes out from all of these. 8 here means 1 comes out from them. We also have a lot of row stuff we haven't done yet with these cages. We have 5, 6, and 8 coming out from all of these here. I'm going to do this one at a time just to avoid a mistake. 5 comes out there, 4 comes out there, 6 and 3, 8 and 1, 5 and 3. Oh, no, I'm doing this math wrong. Hold on. Let me start over with these just to be safe, because I was rushing that a little bit, I think. 4 and 5, 2 and 7, 5, 4, 6, 3, 8, 1. Okay. I don't remember if that's what I had a second ago or not. I was pretty sure I did something wrong there. I was just gonna play it safe. 3 and 6, 7 and 2, and then 5 and 6 come out from here, so that has to be 2 with 7 there. Oh, I missed one though. 3 coming out here, that means that's 1, 8. And we just got the beginning of a new little cage poking its head out here. I will come back to that in a moment, because a little more we can do in this column first. 4, 7, and 8 means 4 there, 4, 5 here. Okay. Did a lot of cleaning up there. This is both the upside and downside of the pencil marking. As you can see, the progress pretty quick when it happens, but it's also a bit tedious. I find it very satisfying. It's why I love killer cages. It's just very fun to me to start removing options from cages. So this is definitely the hardest thing to spot in the puzzle. As the hardest step, I was actually quite worried about leaving this in here as, is this too difficult of a thing to spot? This is sort of the classic Sudoku gatekeeping check, in a sense. We're not trying to gatekeep too much, but again, I'm expecting people to be comfortable with classic Sudoku skills here, and this is a moment where that comes very much in handy. So, the thing you want to focus on, or at least a meta logic you could think about, is in what universe is this helpful? Would be maybe one question you could ask. Not every puzzle creator thinks along those lines, but sometimes it's useful to see, well, I don't see how big this cage is. Why would that be helpful or useful or interesting in some way? So one way to think about it is you could kind of question how big the cage could be. Because now this is a case of involving fog into the logic of the puzzle. So the 6 cage could do a couple things. It could be just a 2-cell 6 cage. We can see from the lack of border on the right that this definitely goes to the right at least one. So it's possible that it could be like that. It's also possible it could be 3 long and go there, or bend downwards. And that's about it, because you cannot have a cage go diagonal into these spots. And if this one did go down here, we would see that from the lack of border here, but there is a border. So we know at minimum we're going to have the numbers take up these spots. So we never have anything bigger than a 6 there. So that's like one initial thing you could do, but you can see that's not enough to give us any information yet. So another thing you could do is maybe question, well, if this was 3 cells long, it would have to be 1, 2, 3. Maybe that breaks something, and it still doesn't. And just to save some time, that will not get you anywhere with this approach. That is often enough, but in this case, that's not going to be what will give you a digit. So instead, the question is, well, why is this useful then? If you think of classic Sudoku stuff, we have 7 up here, which can't go down here. We have a 4, 7, 8, which means 7 can't go over here. 7 can't go there, obviously. And so if you were to think about, where digits could go, you might have already caught this if you were at this stage, but 7 is limited to these 2 spots. You cannot put a 7 into a 6 cage. So that must go here. So again, that is definitely kind of a tricky thing to spot if you're a little rusty on your classic Sudoku skills, but I found that a reasonable enough step to keep in here. And placing that gives us 2 things, and if I recall correctly, these are the final cages needed to have the puzzle be solvable. Now we can see this cage is 3 long, so that must be 1, 2, 3 in some order. We must have 4, 5 to finish off the box here. That is going to resolve these cages now. It's also going to partially resolve this. Now we could ask about the 16 cage over here. I've seen people apparently use a couple different strategies for this. I sort of had one idea in mind for it when I created it, and people have found other ways to do it. I'm just going to look at the way I intended it to be looked at, which is we have 4 cells here with 4 options for it. We have 3, 5, 7, 9 available. So the question you would ask is, how big is this cage? Because 5, 7, 3, and 9 are all potentially valid options for this, depending on how big the cage is. What you want to think about is, if you try to minimize what's going on here, if this was, say, 3 long, it could look like that. That would be the only way for that to exist. If you try to minimize what these options are, 3, 5, and then a 7 there, we would have 15, which means it is potentially possible here. But by just doing 3, 5, 7, that doesn't get you there, which means you're going to have a 9 somewhere in the 16 cage here. And as soon as you have a 9 in there somewhere, you can kind of see the cage almost take a step down in sum. 16 minus 9 is, I'm gonna embarrass myself with the mental math here. That is 7 remaining. That took me longer than it should have. So if you know there's going to be a 9 in the cage, no matter what it does here, you have 7 left over as the remaining sum, and there's no way to sum to 7 using any combination of the digits we have available here. So that's one way. That's the way I thought of it personally. Some people, I guess, thought about this from I think a parity? I was going to say parity option of like even odds, but I'm thinking from memory that doesn't seem right, because it's all odds no matter what here. But either way, that's what I was intending to be thought about here, is as soon as you have a 9 somewhere in here, it forces it to be a 7-9 cage in 2 cells, because you cannot make that work in 3 cells. Meaning this must be 7-9 like this. 9 and 7. 5 and 3. 4 and 5. That resolves this cage up here. Again, I'm pretty sure that's enough to finish most of the grid off once we start doing classic Sudoku catch up a little bit. Might be wrong on that. Again, it's been a couple weeks. I'm going to mostly not narrate too much through this, just to speed it up a little bit. Here we need 1, 5, and 6. 5's over here, 1 and 6 there. 6 and 4's come out. This column needs 1, 3, 9. Please 2, 5, 6 over here. This row needs 4, 7, 9. Please 1, 2, 3 over here. This 7, 9 here is this, which means that has to be a 4. Gives us these 4 and 6, 9 and 1. We now have this resolved down to being exactly a 2-8 pair in some order. So neither of these can be 2-8. And that's going to be enough to get us those digits along with these and that. And also this. Oh, I was wrong. Okay, so there's one more cage. I do actually remember placing that now. Finishing off more classic stuff here. I'm gonna fix this. That's gonna give us a 9 over here, a 1 and a 3. Again, this is the benefit of the conflict checker, if you don't mind taking a little bit of the thinking out of it. Up here, we have 2, 4, 6, and 8 in some orders up here. One of these will be 2, 8, the other will be 4, 6. So this can't be either of those. 2, 8, 4, and 6. That must be 9 and 1. 7 and 9. 2 and 3. That gives us 7 in the middle. I immediately forgot about this cage, even though it just got revealed, so it might be good to look at that. We have 4, 9, 5, 8, or 6, 7. Can't be 7 because there's a 7 in the row. It can't be a 9. That. And so that gives us 5, 8. 2 and 6 here gets a 5 up here. We now know the order of these, as well as this. Almost forgot about this. This needs to be a 6. Here we need a 2 and a 4. We have 4 and 2. So that solves the level 2 killer cage puzzle. So meant to be a little on the tougher side. I feel like you probably could have made these in sort of either order. The first puzzle definitely guided you a lot more. Check the previous video in the playlist for that. Just the way the cages were sort of oriented in the grid, it made it pretty obvious, in my opinion, sort of where to look next. Cages would kind of point to each other in a chain. This one's a little more open-ended in regards to that, but it was still using fog to kind of hide a little bit of the information until it was the right time for it. This definitely requires a bit more classic Sudoku skills to get through this puzzle, especially the step down here with the 6 cage. And then also thinking through possible sum options, which you're not always going to need to have to do. A lot of killer cage puzzles don't even use fog. I like to use fog. So that's the sort of thing I would be looking for if I'm placing cages. I would ask myself, is it reasonable for someone to have to go through that many steps to sort of reduce the options? I felt it was valid here. You may say that in other puzzles. Similar to the last one as well, the solution code, second half of it is here. But like I mentioned in the first video of this, I'm not going to be doing double posts like this anymore past now. So that won't be an issue anymore after this one. Yeah, that concludes the kind of 2-part review of the intro to Killer Cage's puzzles. Thank you.